On the distant planet of Zelnara, a realm ruled by powerful alien beings, there lived a princess whose name was known across the galaxy. Her name was Lyra Na, and she was unlike any ruler the stars had ever seen. The air of authority that surrounded her was impossible to ignore, and her beauty was the stuff of legends. With her tall, slender frame, deep violet skin, and eyes that shimmered like the stars themselves, she captivated all who laid eyes upon her. Yet despite the many admirers who came from all over the galaxy, there was one thing about her that made her infamous. She had rejected every single male who dared to approach her. Lyra Na's rejection was not a simple matter. It was a declaration, a statement, a belief that no male, whether alien or human, could ever meet the standards she had set for herself. To her, they were all the same: weak, inferior, unworthy of even a glance from someone of her stature. She was the heir to the throne of Zelnara, a kingdom that had conquered countless systems. Her people were powerful and advanced, their technology far surpassing anything the humans or any other species had ever known. And yet, no matter how much wealth, strength, or influence they offered, the princess dismissed them all with the same cold, uninterested glance. No male had ever been able to capture her attention, let alone her heart. Many suitors had come to her palace, each one more impressive than the last, but all had left with their pride shattered, their hope of winning her affections dashed. Lyra Na's rejection had become an act so legendary that even the bravest warriors no longer dared to challenge her indifference. To most, she was simply untouchable. Yet, there was one thing that Lyra Na did not count on: the arrival of a human, a soldier named Commander Orc, who was unlike anyone she had ever encountered. Orc had heard the rumors of Lyra Na's beauty and her pride, but he had no interest in being another suitor. His mission was far more important than any personal desire. Earth was at war with a neighboring alien empire, and Orc had been chosen to represent humanity in a diplomatic negotiation with the Zelnara Empire. His task was to form an alliance, a crucial step that could change the course of history. The fate of millions rested on his shoulders, and his superiors had warned him that getting through to the princess would be no easy feat. But Orc, a battle-hardened soldier, was no stranger to challenges. The day he landed on Zelnara, he was greeted with an air of tension. He had been told of the princess's notorious pride, but nothing could have prepared him for the chill that ran through the grand hall as he entered. The palace itself was a testament to Zelnara's strength, with walls made of shimmering stone that seemed to shift and change with every step. Massive windows offered breathtaking views of the alien planet's surface, which glowed with the light of 3 suns. The hall was filled with dignitaries, each one bowing to Lyra Na as she sat on her throne, radiating an aura of power. Orc stood at the back of the room, quietly observing the princess. She was every bit as regal as he had been told. Her long, dark hair flowed like liquid silk down her back, and her eyes glimmered with the mystery of the universe. She held herself with an air of grace and command that could not be denied. But it was her gaze that held the most power. As she scanned the room, her eyes fell upon Orc. For a brief moment, there was no reaction, no welcoming smile, no hint of curiosity. She simply looked at him, her expression neutral, as though he were just another face in the crowd. It was then that Orc made a decision. He would not bow to her. He would not play the game of submission that so many others had fallen into. Instead, he would stand tall as an equal and see if he could gain her respect not through flattery, but through the strength of his character. He would not try to win her affection. He simply wanted to fulfill his mission. Lyra Na's eyes narrowed slightly as she regarded Orc. Most men, when faced with her gaze, would immediately lower their eyes, humbled by her presence. But not this one. This human stood with the same quiet confidence that had earned him his reputation as one of Earth's finest commanders. He was not afraid, and that, more than anything, caught her attention. "Human." Lyra Na's voice was cold, cutting through the silence of the hall like a blade. "Do you think you are worthy of speaking to me? Or are you another male hoping to prove your worth through meaningless gestures?" The room fell silent. All eyes were on Auric now. Some of the Zelnara dignitaries were waiting for him to apologize, to back down. But Auric remained unfazed. He stepped forward, his posture straight, his expression calm. "I'm here to form an alliance," he said simply, his voice carrying authority. "I'm not here to play games." The princess's lips curled into a slight smirk. She had expected him to be intimidated, but instead, he was speaking to her as if they were equals. This was no ordinary human. "You come to my home, and you expect an alliance." Lyrana's voice was laced with amusement. "You must think highly of yourself, human. I do not make deals with those who do not know their place." Auric met, her gaze with a steady stare. "Then it's a good thing I didn't come here to beg for your favor. I came to speak with you as a leader, not as some suitor." Lyra Na raised an eyebrow, intrigued by his boldness. She had seen many males, from various species, attempt to win her over with flattery, gifts, and false promises. But this human had not even tried. He was different, and she couldn't help but wonder why. "The humans are known for their arrogance," Lyra Na said softly, her voice colder now. "Do you think you are the exception?" Auric did not flinch. "I am not here to prove anything. About humans, I am here because it is in your best interest to listen. The war between the human empire and the Zorath has reached a point where only an alliance with your people can save us both." Lyra Na studied him, her eyes narrowing slightly. There was something in his voice, something that rang with truth. It was rare for anyone, especially a human, to speak so directly to her. Usually, they would have cowered or tried to impress her with false promises. "Why should I trust you?" she asked, her voice softening, though still filled with authority. "Because you know as well as I do that the Zorath will not stop until every species falls under their rule," Auric replied. "This war isn't just about your people, it's about all of us." For a moment, there was silence between them. Lyra Na did not speak, but the wheels in her mind were turning. She had never met a human like this before. His resolve, his clarity, and his strength were unlike anything she had seen. She was intrigued, though she would never admit it. The encounter ended with no immediate agreement, but Lyra Na found herself thinking about Auric long after he left her presence. She was still dismissive of the idea of a male being worthy of her, but the seed of curiosity had been planted. Maybe this human, like no one before him, was worth watching. As Auric walked out of the palace that day, he didn't know it yet, but he had already begun to change the course of the princess's world. The days that followed Auric's first meeting with Princess Lyra Na were filled with tension and uncertainty. Auric, the human commander, had been given a difficult task: to secure an alliance between Earth and the Zelnara Empire. He knew that forming a relationship with the princess, a woman who had rejected every male suitor in her life, would not be easy. But he was prepared. He had faced far worse challenges in the heat of battle, and this diplomatic mission was different in his mind. He wasn't there to please the princess or win her favor. His mission was about something much bigger: the survival of his people. Earth was at war with a powerful alien empire, and the Zorath were a threat that could wipe out humanity. Without the help of Zelnara, Earth stood little chance. And yet, no matter how important the stakes were, Auric understood that to convince Lyra Na, he would need to approach her in a way no one had before. Every day, he attended meetings, exchanged knowledge, and discussed tactics. But each time he faced Lirana, she was as cold as the farthest reaches of space. She didn't seem to care about the war or the fate of Earth. She was more interested in maintaining the sense of power and control she had held for so long. To her, humans were just another race, insignificant and unworthy of her attention. Tja. First, Arik was undeterred by her icy demeanor. He had been through worse, but over time he realized that Lyra Na's pride wasn't the only thing that made her distant. There was something deeper, something hidden beneath the surface of her perfect facade. It was as if she had built an impenetrable wall around herself, a wall made of fear and pride, both of which kept everyone, male or female, from ever getting close to her. One evening, after another failed meeting, Arik sat alone in his quarters, staring out at the alien landscape beyond. The stars shimmered brightly in the sky, a vast sea of light stretching endlessly in all directions. He had been tasked with securing a deal that would save humanity. But every attempt to break through, Lirana's defenses had ended in failure. He had to figure out what was going wrong. Why wouldn't she even listen to his plea for help? Why did she continue to shut him out, despite all the evidence that Earth's survival depended on her cooperation? As the hours passed, he began to think. He thought back to their first meeting, to the moment when he had stared her down in the grand hall. There had been something in her eyes, a flicker of something, perhaps curiosity, that had vanished as quickly as it had appeared. What was it? Why had she rejected every male suitor and now even him? He knew she was powerful, a leader unlike any other, but he also knew that there was more to her than her cold exterior. The next day, as he prepared for another audience with the princess, Arik made a decision. He wouldn't try to impress her or persuade her with words. Instead, he would challenge her. He would challenge her strength, her pride, and her very perception of herself. The meeting was set in a vast arena, a place where leaders of the Zelnara Empire tested their might and intellect. It was a place where warriors were forged, where battles were fought, and where honor was earned. Arik had requested this arena as the venue for their next discussion. Lyra Na was intrigued by the request, though she had no intention of taking it seriously. She had agreed simply because she was curious about what the human wanted this time. As she entered the arena, Lyra Na's eyes immediately scanned the area, assessing the situation. She was no stranger to combat. In fact, she had trained as both a warrior and a strategist, honing her skills in both the physical and mental aspects of leadership. She was a master of tactics, and no one, male or female, could best her in a contest of strength or intellect. Arik was already waiting for her in the center of the arena, standing tall and proud, his uniform pristine, and his demeanor unwavering. He had removed all weapons, all technology, everything that could give him an unfair advantage. He wanted to face the princess on equal terms. "You've come to challenge me, human?" Lyra Na's voice was cool, but there was a flicker of something behind her eyes, something that made Arik smile. "I haven't come to challenge you, princess," Arik said calmly. "I've come to show you that I am not like the others." She stepped closer, her gaze intense. "Do you think you're the exception, human? Do you believe that you, with all your arrogance, can make me see you as anything more than another weak male?" "I'm not here to prove that I'm better than you," Arik replied. "I'm here to prove that I can stand beside you, not beneath you. I'm here to prove that the humans aren't weak." Lyra Na raised an eyebrow, her curiosity growing. She had heard many males speak words like these before, but none had dared to stand in her presence with such confidence. Most would have been intimidated by her, or worse, would have fallen to their knees in submission. But not Arik. He stood before her, unwavering. "Very well," she said, her voice carrying a slight edge. "Let us see if you truly can stand beside me." With a swift motion, she raised her hand, signaling the beginning of the challenge. The arena shifted, and the ground beneath them split open to reveal a series of deadly obstacles. The challenge would test their agility, strength, and endurance. Whoever completed it first would be declared the winner. Lyra Na moved first, her body flowing with grace and power as she jumped from platform to platform, easily evading the traps and obstacles that stood in her path. She was a blur of motion, her every movement calculated and perfect. Auric, however, was not far behind. He moved with the same precision, using his military training to navigate the course. Though he was slower than Lyra Na, he made up for it with his unwavering focus and determination. The race through the obstacles was fierce, each step more dangerous than the last. There were traps designed to test their balance, walls that seemed to close in on them, and pits filled with venomous creatures. But both Auric and Lyra Na pressed on, their focus locked on the goal ahead. As the final obstacle approached, a massive wall of flames rose up between them, threatening to block their path. Without hesitation, Lyra Na leaped through the fire, her body twisting in midair to avoid being burned. But Auric, seeing the danger, didn't hesitate either. With a burst of energy, he sprinted forward and used his strength to smash through the wall of flames, emerging on the other side just moments before Lyra Na. They both reached the finish line at the same time, their bodies covered in sweat and dirt, but their eyes locked in a shared moment of mutual respect. The princess, usually so cold and distant, found herself impressed by Auric's persistence and strength. For the first time, she saw him as more than just a human. She saw him as a worthy opponent, someone who could stand beside her as an equal. "Well, done, human," Lyra Na said, her voice softer than it had ever been before. "You've proven that you are not weak, but do not think that this means I will bend to your will. There is more to a true alliance than just strength." Auric nodded, understanding. "I'm not here to force you to bend, princess. I'm here to show you that humans are more than you think. Together, we can be stronger." As they stood in the arena, the tension between them had shifted. They were no longer adversaries but equals, each one testing the other, each one respecting the other's strength. And though the princess remained guarded, there was no denying that something had changed. Lyra Na, for the first time, was starting to see the human in a new light. The days following the arena challenge were filled with a strange new atmosphere between Princess Lyra Na and Commander Auric. Lyra Na had not expected to find a human worthy of her attention, let alone one who could keep up with her in physical combat. While her pride had initially kept her distant, there was now something different in her demeanor when she interacted with Auric. Though she would never admit it, she felt an unexpected curiosity toward him. He had proven that he was not like the others. He had shown resilience, persistence, and an inner strength that challenged her own beliefs about humans. However, despite this newfound respect, Lyra Na remained determined to maintain control. She would not let one human, no matter how strong or capable, make her question her convictions. She had long rejected all males, and the idea of allowing one to change her mind was not something she was willing to entertain. But she couldn't shake the feeling that Auric was unlike any male she had ever encountered. For Auric, the stakes were higher than ever. He had won Lyra Na's respect in the arena, but respect alone would not be enough to secure an alliance. He knew that the survival of Earth depended on their cooperation, and he also knew that Lyra Na's pride was not the only barrier between them. He needed to push her further, challenge her more, and prove that humans were not just capable of surviving but thriving in the face of adversity. It was not just about his personal pride anymore. It was about saving his people. The princess had made it clear that the next step would involve a test of strength, a true test, one that would prove whether Auric was capable of standing beside her as an equal. This was not a diplomatic gesture. This was a challenge to his very being. Lyra Na had no intention of making it easy for him. She would test him until there was no doubt in her mind about his worth. The test was set to take place on the floating islands of Zelnara, a place where the air was thin and the ground unstable. The islands were known for their dangerous terrain, with cliffs that dropped into the void below and winds that could knock even the most seasoned warriors off their feet. It was a place where only the strongest could survive. To many, the floating islands were a symbol of Zelnara's strength. To Auric, they were a test of his will. As the sun began to set on the horizon, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink, Auric stood at the edge of the island looking down at the vast expanse below. The wind whipped through his hair, and the sheer drop to the ground below was enough to make anyone hesitate, but Auric didn't flinch. He had faced death countless times before, and he had never allowed fear to control him. Lyra Na appeared beside him, her presence commanding. She was dressed in a sleek, silver armor that shimmered in the fading light, her eyes fixed on the path ahead. Her face was unreadable, her expression a mask of determination. She had brought Auric here for a reason. This test would push him to his limits. "You have already proven that you are strong in body," she said, her voice cold but not unkind. "Now you must prove that you are strong in mind and spirit." Auric turned to face her, meeting her gaze directly. "I'm ready," he replied. There was no hesitation in his voice, no doubt in his heart. He had trained his entire life for moments like these. Lyra Na gestured to the path before them. "The test will begin now. We will cross the island's bridges, but you must not fall. The winds are unpredictable and the bridges are fragile. If you fall, you will not survive. Keep your focus, and do not allow fear to control you." Auric nodded, taking a deep breath as he stepped forward onto the narrow bridge that stretched out before them. The path was barely wide enough for a single person, and the ground below was invisible, lost in the thick mist that swirled beneath the floating island. The wind howled around them, threatening to pull them off balance with every step. Yet Auric moved forward with steady determination. He had seen far worse in the wars on Earth, and he was not about to be undone by something as simple as wind and gravity. Lyra Na followed behind him, her steps light but deliberate. She was a master of balance, of controlling her body's movements, in even the most treacherous situations. As she walked, she observed Auric closely, noting the way he handled the challenge. He was not as graceful as she was, but he had a certain steadiness about him. He was focused, unyielding, and most importantly, he was not afraid. The bridge was long, stretching across a massive chasm, and the gusts of wind grew stronger the farther they went. Auric's muscles burned as he tightened his grip on the ropes that held the bridge together. He was pushing himself harder than he ever had before, but he refused to slow down. He could feel Lyra Na's eyes on him, watching his every move. He could not afford to fail. As they reached the midpoint of the bridge, the wind howled louder, and the bridge began to sway dangerously. Auric stumbled slightly, but he caught himself before he could lose his balance. The princess's eyes narrowed slightly as she watched him struggle. To her surprise, Auric didn't panic. He didn't flinch or hesitate. He simply adjusted his footing and pressed on. "You're doing well," Lyra Na said, though her voice held a trace of surprise. "But the true test is not in your strength. It is in your ability to control your mind." Auric's breath was steady, his focus unwavering. "I don't need to control my mind, princess. I just need to trust myself." They continued across the bridge, and as they neared the far end, the winds grew even more violent. Auric's heart raced as the bridge began to creak and groan under the pressure. He could see the edge of the island ahead, but the path was narrowing, the bridge becoming more unstable with each step. Suddenly, a powerful gust of wind slammed into Auric, knocking him off balance. For a moment, it felt as though the world was spinning around him. His legs buckled, and he felt himself losing his grip on the ropes. His heart pounded in his chest as he teetered on the edge of the bridge. But then, something inside him clicked. He wasn't going to fall. He wasn't going to let fear control him. With a sudden surge of strength, he steadied himself, his grip tightening on the ropes as he took another step forward. The wind howled around him, but he no longer heard it. All that mattered was the path ahead. With a final push, Arik reached the end of the bridge, his body trembling with exhaustion. He had made it. He had passed the test. Lirana reached the end moments later, her expression unreadable. She studied Arik for a long moment, her eyes searching for any sign of weakness. But all she saw was a man who had overcome the odds, a man who had faced the impossible and emerged victorious. "You did well," she said, her voice softer than it had ever been before. "You have shown me that you are more than just a human. You are a warrior." Arik turned to face her, his chest heaving with breath. "I'm not just a warrior. I'm here to stand with you, to help you." Lirana remained silent for a moment, her eyes meeting his with an intensity that neither of them had expected. There was no more arrogance in her gaze, no more pride. For the first time, she saw him as an equal, someone worthy of standing beside her. The air on Zelnara had grown tense in the weeks that followed Arik's completion of the bridge test. The princess, Lirana, had been watching him closely, studying him with a mixture of curiosity and wariness. He had done what no male had done. Before, he had faced her challenges head-on without hesitation, and each time he had met her tests with strength and resolve. For a while, it had been almost a game for Lirana, a test to see how far Arik could be pushed before he broke. But as the days passed, she found herself questioning her own motives, her own beliefs. For years, Lirana had held on to the notion that she was untouchable, that no male could ever be worthy of her attention, let alone her affection. She had rejected every suitor with ease, believing that her pride and strength were all that she needed. Her reputation as the untouchable princess was something she had carefully built, and she had always assumed that it was her right to remain untouched by the affections of any male. But Arik was different. There was something about him that she couldn't ignore. It wasn't just his physical strength or his resilience. It was his unwavering belief in himself, his quiet confidence. When he spoke, it wasn't out of arrogance. There was a sincerity to his words, a conviction that she had never encountered before. His focus was on the mission, on the survival of his people, and that devotion had begun to chip away at the walls she had built around herself. Lirana had always thought that weakness came with vulnerability. She had never allowed herself to be vulnerable, afraid that it would make her weak. But as she spent more time with Arik, she started to question that belief. She had never truly let anyone in, not in the way she was beginning to let him, and yet, despite all of this, she still resisted. She couldn't let go of her pride. She couldn't let herself become soft or weak. To do so would be to lose control, and control was the one thing she had always relied on. It was a paradox she couldn't solve. Part of her wanted to let him in, to understand him better, but another part of her fought fiercely to keep him at arm's length. She had rejected every male before him, and she wasn't about to let this. Human change everything. But Arik's persistence wore on her. No matter how much she tried to shut him out, no matter how much she tried to distance herself, he wouldn't back down. He wasn't like the others. His determination wasn't about winning her favor. It was about mutual respect. He was willing to stand with her as an equal, not as a conqueror or a subordinate. And that, perhaps, was the most dangerous thing of all. One evening, as the twin moons of Zelnara rose into the night sky, casting an ethereal glow over the palace, Lirana found herself alone in her private chambers. The walls of the room were adorned with intricate tapestries depicting the history of her people, but tonight, she wasn't focused on the beauty of the artwork. Her mind was preoccupied with thoughts of Auric. She had just come from another meeting. With him, another discussion about Earth's needs and the alliance between their two peoples. As always, Auric had spoken with clarity and conviction. And as always, Lirana had kept her guard up. But something was different this time. She couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to him than just a soldier. He wasn't just fighting for his people. He was fighting for something greater, a belief in unity and working together. It was a belief that she had never fully understood until now. The more she thought about it, the more she realized that the walls she had built around herself weren't as strong as she had once believed. They had cracked, and now the pressure was building. She could feel it. The tension, the pull between her pride and something else. Something deeper. Something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. Her thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock at the door. "Princess?" A voice called from the other side. It was Auric. Lirana paused, her heart beating slightly faster than usual. She had not expected him to come tonight. It was late and their usual meetings were over for the day, but something in her gut told her that this time it was different. She took a deep breath, steadying herself, and nodded. "Enter," she said, her voice calm but tinged with uncertainty. The door slid open, and Auric stepped inside. He looked the same as always, strong, confident, but there was something in his eyes tonight that made Lirana's breath catch in her throat. He wasn't here for diplomacy or strategy. This time there was something personal in his gaze. "I hope I'm not disturbing you, Princess," Auric said, his voice softer than usual. He wasn't standing at attention as he usually did. Tonight, he seemed more relaxed, more open. Lirana looked at him for a moment, unsure of what to say. She had always kept her emotions in check, always maintained control, but now, facing him in the quiet of her private chambers, she felt vulnerable, exposed. "No, you're not disturbing me," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. She gestured to a nearby chair, inviting him to sit. "Please, have a seat." Auric nodded and sat down, his eyes never leaving hers. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. It was a silence that was both heavy and fragile, as if the smallest word could break the tension in the air. Finally, it was Auric who spoke. "I know that things haven't been easy, Princess. I know I've been persistent, but I need you to understand something. I'm not here to change you. I'm here to stand beside you, to fight beside you." Lirana's heart skipped a beat at his words. She had heard him say similar things before, but this time they felt different. His words weren't just about the mission. They were about something personal, something real. And for the first time, Lirana felt the weight of her own walls beginning to crumble. She stood up abruptly, turning her back to him. Her chest tightened as emotions she had kept buried for so long began to rise to the surface. She couldn't look at him right now. Not when she was feeling so exposed, so vulnerable. She had always prided herself on her strength, but now she felt weak in a way she couldn't understand. "I've never let anyone get close," Lirana said, quietly, her voice almost trembling. "Not like this. I've rejected every male because I thought that was the only way to stay strong." Auric stood up, his footsteps quiet as he approached her. He didn't say anything, just stood by her side, offering her a silent understanding. He didn't need to speak. He knew what she was feeling. Lirana turned to face him, her eyes meeting his. There was something in her gaze now, a vulnerability that she had never shown before. She had spent so long trying to maintain control, to prove that she was untouchable. But now, she saw that true strength wasn't in control. It was in the ability to let go, to trust someone else. "I don't know what to do," she admitted softly. "I've spent my life pushing people away, but now Now I'm afraid of what might happen if I let someone in. Auric's hand reached out, gently, touching her arm in a way that was both comforting and powerful. You don't have to do anything alone, Princess, he said quietly. You never have to be afraid. Lyra Na looked at him, her heart racing. She had spent so many years rejecting the idea of needing anyone, but here, with Auric, everything felt different. She didn't have to be alone. She didn't have to hold on to her pride at the cost of everything else. And for the first time, she allowed herself to feel something more than pride, something raw, something real. The days that followed Lyra Na's quiet admission marked a turning point. For the first time, the princess allowed herself to be vulnerable, to open up to the possibility that someone, even a human, could be her equal. Auric's presence, once a challenge to her pride, was now something she couldn't ignore. She found herself thinking about him more often, about his quiet strength and his unwavering dedication. It was as if everything she had built, every wall she had constructed, around her heart, was slowly being undone. But despite this growing connection, Lyra Na wasn't ready to let go of her old ways entirely. Her pride still held sway over her actions, and she was torn between her newfound feelings for Auric and the fear of losing her strength. She couldn't let herself be weak, could she? To trust someone, to let them into her world, was a step she had never taken before. It scared her more than she cared to admit. Auric, however, was patient. He had learned to be patient over the years, especially during the war. He knew that Lyra Na wasn't ready to fully embrace the idea of an alliance, let alone a deeper connection. He understood her hesitation, her fears, but he also knew that he couldn't give up now, not when the stakes were so high. The fate of Earth depended on their alliance, and he believed that together they could be stronger than either of them alone. One evening, as the twin moons of Zelnara rose high in the sky, casting their pale light across the palace, Auric and Lyra Na met again in the gardens of the royal palace. The scent of alien flowers filled the air, and the sound of distant waterfalls echoed softly in the background. It was a peaceful place, a sanctuary from the tensions of the outside world. But for Auric and Lyra Na, the peace was fleeting, overshadowed by the weight of their unspoken words. They stood at the edge of a small pond, watching the ripples on the surface of the water. For a moment, neither spoke. The silence between them was thick, filled with the tension of everything they had yet to say. But this time, it wasn't an uncomfortable silence. It was a space where both of them could simply exist, understanding each other in a way that words couldn't fully express. Finally, Lyra Na broke the silence. "I've never let anyone in, Commander," she said softly, her voice tinged with uncertainty. "I've always believed that showing weakness would destroy me, that if I let go, if I allowed myself to trust anyone, I would lose everything. My people, my throne, everything." Auric turned to face her, his expression gentle. "I understand," he said quietly. "I've seen what happens when people are too afraid to trust. It tears them apart, makes them believe they have to fight, alone. But the truth is, no one can do everything on their own, not even the strongest." Lyra Na's eyes flickered with doubt. "But what if I lose control? What if I can't keep my people safe? What if my emotions, my weaknesses, become a threat to them?" Auric took a step closer, his voice steady and reassuring. "You don't have to do everything alone, Lyra Na. You've built walls around yourself for so long, but that doesn't mean you have to stay trapped inside them. You've shown me your strength, your power, but I've also seen your heart. You have something inside of you that is stronger than any wall. It's the ability to care, to protect, to fight for what's right. And that's what makes you a great leader." Lyra Na looked at him, her eyes searching his face for any sign of insincerity. But there was none. She could see that Auric believed every word he said. He wasn't trying to manipulate her or flatter her. He was simply speaking the truth. And for the first time, she found herself believing it. "I don't know if I'm ready to let go of everything I've built," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I do know that I don't want to face this alone. I don't want to lose everything just because I'm too proud to ask for help." Arik nodded, understanding the weight of her words. "You don't have to lose anything, Lirana. We can face the future together, as allies, as equals." For a long moment, Lirana stood still, her thoughts racing. She had spent so much of her life guarding herself, refusing to trust anyone. But Arik had shown her that there was strength in letting go, in trusting others. Maybe, just maybe, it was time to take that leap, to allow herself to be vulnerable, to let someone in. Not just for her own sake, but for the sake of her people and the alliance they were about to form. Finally, she spoke again, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "I don't know what the future holds, but I'm willing to face it with you, as equals. No walls between us." Arik smiled, a genuine, heartfelt smile. "That's all I've ever wanted, Lirana. An alliance built on trust, respect, and the belief that we can be stronger together." The princess met his gaze, her heart swelling with a mixture of hope and uncertainty. She had never felt this, way before, and it scared her. But it also filled her with a sense of purpose she had never known. For the first time in her life, she wasn't fighting alone. She had someone by her side who believed in her, who saw her for who she truly was. And that was the beginning of something new, something powerful. The following days saw a shift in the relationship between Arik and Lirana. They began to work together, not as separate leaders of their respective people, but as partners, equals, each with their strengths and weaknesses. Arik had earned her respect not just through his strength, but through his unwavering belief in unity. He had shown her that true leadership was about more than control and power. It was about understanding, trust, and the willingness to fight for something greater than oneself. Lirana, in turn, began to open up more, not just to Arik, but to the possibility of a future where humans and Zelnara could work together, side by side. The alliance they were forming was not just political, it was personal. And as they worked to finalize the terms of the agreement, the bond between them deepened. There were no more walls between them, no more barriers. They were partners in every sense of the word. On the day the formal alliance between Earth and Zelnara was signed, Lirana stood before the gathered leaders, her gaze steady and unwavering. She had always been proud of her people, proud of the strength they had built over the centuries. But today, there was something different in her eyes. Today, she wasn't just a princess. She was a leader who had learned to trust, to let go, and to accept that sometimes true strength came from standing together, not alone. Arik stood beside her, his presence a silent promise of support. Together, they signed the document that would seal their alliance, knowing that their people's future depended on the unity they had forged. It wasn't just a political move. It was a declaration of trust, of cooperation, and of something more. It was the beginning of a new chapter, and as they looked out at the crowd, Arik and Lirana both knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, as allies, as equals, as partners.